Welcome to Witham Sounding Board, a podcast sharing powerful business tips, insights, and trends for those seeking to become a rock star in their industry.
Hello and welcome back to Witham's C-Suite podcast series. I'm your host, Cuddy Thomas. I am part of Witham's outsourced accounting and fractional CFO practice line. We support the offices of controllers and CFOs. If you'd like to know more about what we do and how we support our clients, please go to www.witham.com/oasis. And that is pronounced OASYS. Joining me today is Scott D. Anthony. Scott is a clinical professor of strategy at the Tuck School of Business in Dartmouth, where his research and teaching focus on adaptive challenges and disruptive change. Scott previously spent more than 20 years at Innersight, a growth and strategy consultancy founded by Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen. Scott served as Innersight elected managing partner from 2012 to 2018. He has a book out titled Epic Disruptions, 11 Innovations That Shaped Our Modern World. This is expected to be released on September 16, so we're all excited for that. My discussion with Scott will focus on how major innovations throughout history can teach us how to lead in times of change. Scott, welcome. Did I miss anything?
No, you didn't. You did a great job. It is my pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
All right. What inspired you to write Epic Disruptions?
I'll be absolutely honest with you. It actually wasn't my idea. So a couple years ago, I started a new career as a teacher. I'd spent 20 years as a consultant and started teaching in 2022. And I taught this class called Leading Disruptive Change. And I proposed to my publisher, Kevin Evers from the Harvard Business Review Press, that I write a book based on my class. He said, "That sounds interesting, but we actually have an idea for you." And the idea was this book, this historical look at disruptive innovation. He said, "We just named it one of 4 ideas that shaped the world, disruptive innovation. You've been studying disruption for more than 2 decades. What about a history book?" I couldn't get the idea out of my head once I heard it. It was such a great idea. I decided that was going to be my next book project. So I thank Kevin Evers at Harvard Business Review Press for giving me the seed.
Very good. Very good. This is your 9th. And, just getting to one book done. It's very involved in just speaking about just doing the 9th one. So how is this one different from your earlier work?
Well, I mentioned this career shift. The first 8 books that I wrote were when I was a consultant, and they are pretty classic consultant-written business books. So you're in the field, you're doing work with the client, you observe something, you say, maybe there's a generalizable framework around this. You go and look for other case studies, and that's your book. It is a case study-driven framework book. This is a history book. There are 11 stories in it. The first one starts in the year 142 AD, so it goes way back in history. And there are frameworks and ideas in it, but they're in the background, not in the foreground. That's the big difference.
Very good. Disruption is one thing that sometimes people misunderstood, right? Most often, I feel people are more comfortable with the status quo and not try to embrace new things and move forward. What is one of the most misunderstood terms in businesses, and what do people get wrong?
Well, Cuddy, there's a couple things that I could comment on there. First, let me just be clear about the way I use the word disruption. And the thing that people generally get wrong is they assume that a disruption is a big change. And when I use the word disruption, it reflects the research of my mentor, Professor Clayton Christensen from the Harvard Business School, who brought the term to the business lexicon. The way that a disruption is defined is it is an innovation that changes the game and therefore drives explosive growth. Let me make it real with a short story. My father was born in 1947. At the time, there was exactly one computer in the world. It weighed about 30 tons. I was born in 1975. The previous year, Digital Equipment Corporation sold 30,000 computers, more, but still not very many. They weighed now about 1,300 pounds. When my daughter Holly was born in 2007, there were 250 million computers sold. You've got desktops and laptops almost everywhere. That same year, the Apple iPhone is created. We now all carry a supercomputer in our pocket. This is disruptive innovation, taking what once was complicated and expensive, making it simple and affordable, driving huge growth, changing the world.
Yeah, that's good. Don't even get me started with I get into accounting. I used to work on floppy disk, right? I do young kids they don't quite understand what that is, right? The floppy disk basically keeps just one Excel file.
The memory I associate with is when I started as a strategy consultant way back when, we used to hand draw slides. So you would go and get a piece of paper and you write out the thing you were going to create. And I was going to say PowerPoint, but PowerPoint didn't exist. Right. And there was a team that you would send that to, and they would take your scribbles and use a proprietary software product to turn it into a visual that might go into an acetate, like an actual thing you put on a transparency and project it up. I got training about how do you go and place something on an overhead projector. You say this to kids now, and they're just like, okay, boomer, the world moves on.
It's fascinating. And for people who were born around that time to now, I would think they're the lucky ones because they get to experience everything changed over time and really fast and quickly. Right. But then that takes me to my second question on what is really, or how do business leaders tell the difference between temporary trend or a true disruption?
It's really hard in the middle of a change. In 1620, Sir Francis Bacon said, there have been three things that have truly transformed the world: the printing press, compass, and gunpowder. And you look back hundreds of years, it's very obvious. In the middle, it can often be very messy. There are two questions that I really ask. The first is, do you see signs that people are really changing their behavior at some degree of scale to do something different? And two, is there a fundamentally different business model that people are following that allow them to make money in new ways? Take something that's going on right now, generative artificial intelligence. As we watch in our school, what people show up looking differently now. When we see 18-year-olds who say AI is now, as Sam Altman would say, it's part of my operating system. I just will use artificial intelligence for everything. That is a huge behavior shift that has the potential for big disruptive change. And the way the AI companies are making money is really different than the way people made money in the past. So when you see that big behavior change, new business models, if you're a business leader, you say, this is not a fad. I need to pay attention to something like this.
Yeah, that's a key point. I was going to mention the cell phone evolution from Nokia being the industry leader until BlackBerry and then iPhone, of course. But when you go back in history, you look at robotics, how robotics affected blue collar jobs. Now the talk on the street now is AI affecting white collar jobs in a way, but we have to embrace it. I mean, when Excel came to life, and someone was telling me that, we accountants were done, it makes us more efficient. Right?
Absolutely agree. And if you follow the thread with robotics, if you actually look at the research in robotics, people have found that surprisingly, companies that invest in robotics end up hiring more, not less people, because robotics allows them to operate in new ways. They're driving efficiencies in new ways. There are new roles that they need. Of course, the tasks are changing. The individual things that people are doing are changing, just like it changed when you went from pen and paper to Excel to connected Excel to new forms of solutions and databases and so on. The actual things you're doing are changing. The problems that need to be solved are ever present. The requirement that you have good creative brains approaching those problems always exists. Will AI destroy some jobs? Of course. AI will absolutely destroy some jobs. Will there be a lot of new things that are created that none of us can see right now? No doubt about it at all. And I think life's a lot more interesting with new technologies. And I think you really don't have a choice. The technologies are there. You got to learn to embrace them. One of the big things I tell people, it's very easy when you see new technologies to be scared by them. It's natural. That's a very human response. Replace the fear with fun. Find ways to turn it into a game. When AI first came out, I started doing songs with my 13-year-old son, Harry, coming up with bedtime stories for my 8-year-old son, Teddy. We started doing images with my 17-year-old daughter, Holly. She's an artist, so that drove her crazy, but whatever. The point is, we're all mucking around with the technology, and that just makes it a lot safer to do it. Replace fear with fun.
Yeah, I totally agree. Going back to your book, so one of the most surprising parts of the book is the examples that you have. You're picking them from different era, like, for instance, the Julia Child, the Big Macs, cryptocurrency. What is the connection?
Cuddy, the book is called Epic Disruptions. So the connection between everything is you have either a completed story or an in-process story of disruption, something that's taking what was complicated and expensive and making it simple and affordable. Take Julia Child for a second. When people hear that, they're like, what is she doing in a book about disruption? Well, before Julia Child and Simca Beck and Louisette Berthold wrote Mastering the Art of French Cooking, if you lived in America and you wanted to get great French food, what did you do? You had to get in a plane or get on a boat and go to France. She made it simple and accessible for a broader population to enjoy great food in their own home. That's the essence of disruptive innovation. She then went on television and had shows that made it simple and easy for people to cook. She disrupted just as much as Sam Altman and his team are doing at OpenAI right now, in a very different space, in a very different way. And as you begin to look at these stories that each take place at different times in different industries and so on, you see some really common patterns. And you understand those patterns, you can make better sense of a world that's changing so rapidly.
Yeah, it's fascinating. On the 11 innovations that you featured in your book, how did you select them? Are they just there that it's a normal person will say these are supposed to be the top 11? Or what were the thoughts that you put into selecting those 11?
And I would not even hope that these are the top 11. They are the 11 that I picked. And the process went something like this. It's not quite as orderly as this, but this is the basic logic. Get a long list, and a long list. Clayton Christensen, I mentioned before, he wrote a book in 2003 called The Innovator's Solution that had a few pages that said, here's every disruption I have identified in history. Augment that list with other things that he didn't identify but fit the basic pattern and say, okay, we've got maybe 150 things to choose from. Then really ask two questions. How interesting is the story? Is you do want people to read the book. And
That's right.
Two, how much are you going to learn from interrogating it? I went into the research with questions like, who actually does this? Who are the heroes of these stories? Are they predictable? Is it speeding up? Are they always good, the endings of the story? So I wanted to pick stories that would help me answer those questions. So it really is, how interesting is the story? How much do you learn from studying it? Are there other ones that might have been better? Who knows? The second I started doing it, my friends would be like, well, what about fertilizer? You got to have fertilizer. Or what about this country or that person or whatever? Maybe there'll be an Epic Disruptions 2 somewhere in the future where I can tell more of the stories. But the 11 are the 11. And people sometimes say, why 11? I am a big fan of the movie Spinal Tap. Spinal Tap 2 is coming out September 12th. And there is the famous line in Spinal Tap, this one goes to 11. This book does too.
Usually they will say things come in 3. 11, yes. I have a better question for you. Can you share a favorite story from the book that really stuck with you?
There are a lot, but I mentioned Julia Child before, so I'll tell you a quick Julia Child story. So Mastering the Art of French Cooking came out in 1961. It has hundreds of recipes, but one that is notably absent is cooking a baguette at home. And the reason it was absent is Julia couldn't figure out how to do it. Cooking a baguette, you need to have a special oven that only goes in a boulangerie to actually produce the distinctive French bread. So she started what she ultimately called the Great French Bread Experiment. To do it, she devoured cookbooks. She talked to people who were experts in things like, how exactly do you cut the bread to release its gluten cloak? She experimented like crazy, ran 30 separate experiments, would do things like put a basin of water in the bottom of an oven and have a towel to act like a wick to try and create steam. Ultimately determined you take very cold water and put a burning hot axe head into the water or tile, and it creates the smoke that you need for a baguette. 284 pounds of flour were required to ultimately come up with a, wait for it, 31-page recipe for a French baguette. And I love this story because the behaviors that Julia found, being curious, being customer obsessed. How can people do it themselves? Collaborating with the smartest people, going and experimenting, and never taking no for an answer. Those are the ingredients of successful innovation. So she demonstrates it with the Great French Bread Experiment.
Wow. I did not know that. I need to check that out. I'm not a cook.
Well, Julia Child would say, just like the rat in Ratatouille, anybody can be a cook. And I will tell you, Cuddy, I would say 3 years ago, I would say I'm not a cook. And I did a pretty nice job of Julia's chocolate mousse a couple months ago. I will say my wife played a huge assisting role in a couple pivotal moments, but she will still give me probably a B+ for my effort, which is pretty good.
It's just pretty good. Very good. So what are the warning signs that a disruption is coming, and how can leaders prepare for it?
Two things really to watch for. One is the market condition. So disruption will take root whenever you have a market that's not being adequately served. And sometimes it can be what people are providing is too complicated. Sometimes it can be people can't access it at all. You only can consume if you've got wealth, or you go to an inaccessible location, et cetera. Think about healthcare today. Healthcare is really good if you've got a really bad condition that requires the best experts in the world come together. They can solve the toughest problems in the US. We can solve just about anything. It's really bad in terms of doing the basics, making it simple, making it affordable, enabling people to do it themselves. That is a circumstance where there's the potential for disruption. You then look at the other side. Has someone introduced something that fits the common pattern of disruption? Trading off pure performance along dimensions that historically mattered to make something simpler, to make it more accessible, to make it more affordable. So in healthcare right now, you see people who are working on wearable devices who you wouldn't historically call healthcare companies, but people like Google's Fitbit Arm or Whoop or Garmin or others. You're showing me, you can't see it if you're hearing this, but it looks like an Oura Ring. You have people who are getting into the smart health space. Classic disruption. Would you rely on that if you had a really complicated condition you need to deal with? Absolutely not. Can you use it for early warning signs of other things that might happen, ways to optimize your health and so on? For sure. And the thing you know for sure is the technology gets better over time. You're going to see more features, more functions, or integrates in with Dexcom as people are monitoring their blood glucose levels and understanding exactly cause and effect between eating and exercise and so on. It will have big disruptive impact. We don't see it today if we're a traditional healthcare provider because it's really at the edge, but those are the ingredients that create the conditions for disruption.
That's it. That's very, very good point. I'm a huge proponent from a progressive perspective, very big on looking at it. And, I delve into a lot of data, like in terms of health and, all the things around health, precautionary and after the fact. So, we'll see how the next few years are going to look like with all of this happening. I mentioned Nokia. That's just one of the Bible examples I have in terms of why companies tend to hold back when there's an innovation, or they just clearly did not listen to their customer base as to where things are going. Now, as of now, so what are the things that typically will hold a company back from embracing innovation, and even when they see it coming?
And they always do. I will say, back when I was a consultant and I worked with lots of organizations dealing with disruptive change, not a one was blind. Blindness is not the problem. You can see it coming. The response is the hard part. So what holds them back? One of my favorite finds in doing research for the book was a 1548 proclamation issued by King Edward VI in England, or probably his team of advisors because he was 10 years old at the time. Anyway, the proclamation was against those that doeth innovate. So the king specifically said, do not innovate. Why? Well, an innovator questions the status quo. If you're questioning the status quo in 1548, who are you questioning? You're questioning the king. You're questioning God. That is not a good thing. Right. Organizations don't issue these proclamations, but they act like they do, because what a disruption does is it changes power dynamics. It changes the very identity of an organization. It's different, and because of that, it's uncomfortable. So what leaders need to do is they got to get ready for this. They need to go and live at the periphery and understand the changes that might be coming. They have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. They have to be willing to experiment. They have to be willing to let go of yesterday to create space for tomorrow. None of that is easy. All of it is essential in today's fast-moving world.
Yeah, you have to be continuously be nimble and be ready to embracing these changes. That is my last question I have for you, Scott. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and for us to have the opportunity to preview Epic Disruptions. Anything you want to add?
The last thing I would just say, Cuddy, just building off the last question, it's really important for people to remember that as scary as change feels, as scary as disruption feels, the net result of grabbing hold of disruption is explosive growth. So if you're a leader in an organization and you see a disruption coming, if you grab hold of it early and you act in the right way, you have unlocked a new wave of growth for your organization. Take the Apple iPhone. In another world, Apple would never have launched it. We forget this now, but Apple had this really successful line of products called the iPod, which it destroyed when it launched the iPhone. But the iPhone created so much more growth, it was a great thing for the organization. So don't be afraid. Go and make it happen. That's the only way to own the future.
Very good. Thank you so much, Scott. His book, Epic Disruption, 11 Innovations That Shaped Our Modern World, comes out on September 16th. Please check it out. Again, I want to thank Scott again for coming on and to Withum C-Suite podcast series. We provide outsourced accounting and fractional CFO. We support the offices of controllers and CFO. And if you'd like to know more about what we do and how we support our clients, please go to www.withum.com/oasis. And that's spelled OASYS. Thanks again, Scott.
Thank you, Cuddy. Be well.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you'll be first in line to hear what's coming next. Don't want to wait for our next episode? Check us out at withum.com. That's WITHUM.com.